What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm so honored to introduce you all to MK Ultra, MONARCH, Human Experimentation, Dark Lab, Secret Space Program, and Human Hybrid Chimera Survivor, Overcomer, and Whistleblower, published writer and author, and an incredible woman stepping forward to provide the reasons and the bigger picture, the war for cosmic control, Anna Starfire. In the vast tapestry of human resilience, few stories burn as fiercely or illuminate as profoundly as that of Anna's. A human hybrid chimera, a dark lab survivor, and a fearless voice rising from the depths of secrecy to challenge the very fabric of our reality. Her life, forged in the crucible of unimaginable trials, stands as a testament to the indomitable human spirit that can transform profound suffering into a radiant force for truth and awakening. Through her gripping accounts in works like The Hybrid Project and Starfire Disclosure, Anna has not only chronicled her extraordinary journey in her three-part memoir, but has become a powerful advocate for survivors everywhere, empowering others to reclaim their narratives and confront the hidden forces that shape our world. Born into the enigmatic folds of the Illuminati and donated as an orphan into the shadowy corridors of secret military labs, Anna's early existence was claimed by programs far beyond ordinary comprehension. In the 1960s, as Nazi doctors were brought to Florida to advance the space program's clandestine ambitions, she became a living vessel for genetic experiments designed to enhance mind control outcomes on both humans and animals. Surgically modified with brain-based implants for total mind and body control, she was known to her CIA handlers as MONARCH 47, or MK47 for short. These interventions linked her artificial neural pathways to AI systems on satellites, military computer networks, and other strategic interests, while special tissues were harvested for cloning endeavors. She describes how autism vaccines served as gateways to brain implants, voice-to-skull technology, and sophisticated mind control products, all woven into a larger war for cosmic control. Scientists reverse engineered advanced technologies with the aid of advanced species, using subjects like Anna to push the boundaries of what it means to be human. Her experiences raise profound questions. Are humans being genetically engineered for greater compatibility for artificial life in the void of space? Contact with other advanced species punctuated her personal odyssey, offering glimpses into realities that stretch far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The secret space program's roots, she reveals, trace back to the aftermath of World War II, blooming into a network of experiments aimed at securing cosmic dominance through the fusion of human potential and extraterrestrial insight. Yet what elevates Anna from a survivor to a thriver, is not merely the harrowing details of her testimony, but the transcendent power with which she has risen above them. In the face of systematic control that sought to redefine her very essence, she discovered an extraordinary capacity within her modified mind. Harnessing her artificial brain implants, she learned to hack satellites, turning the tools of her captivity into instruments of liberation and revelation. This act of defiance was not just technical brilliance, it was a profound declaration of sovereignty, a spark of human that no implant or no protocol could extinguish. Today, Anna shines as an awe-inspiring advocate whose courage inspires everyone she touches. Through the Hybrid Project, grounded in true events of her life, Starfire Disclosure, which unveils the nature of experiments conducted on human beings to unlock advanced technology, and MK Ultra Dark Labs, which describes how Nazi doctors were brought to Florida for the space program during the 1960s, she offers not only a synopsis of her path, but a roadmap for healing and empowerment for other survivors. She does not merely recount the bigger picture of cosmic conflict and genetic manipulation. She transforms it into a call for awareness, resilience, and collective awakening. Her testimony is more than a chronicle of survival. It's a moving anthem of triumph. She stands as living proof that no force can ultimately contain the light of a soul determined to disclose, to heal, and to inspire. In her story, we find not despair, but an invitation to rise, to question, and to honor the extraordinary resilience that dwells within us all. Her voice reminds us that even in the darkest laboratories of power, the human spirit can evolve into something greater, a hybrid of endurance and hope, capable of bridging worlds and reclaiming the stars. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and overcomer, survivor advocate, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, a cosmic warrior of truth, a guardian of the human spirit, and an eternal flame guiding survivors toward freedom and the infinite possibilities beyond. The one, the only, Anna Starfire. Anna, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And I just feel a lot of wisdom and uplifting as we enter into this program together. And I'm just so impressed with all the details you gathered from my books. And I think it's a wonderful description, and I'm very honored by that description. So thank you very much. We spoke earlier, and I had mentioned that I have another book that is in progress. It's taking a while, that deals with more focus regarding the secret space program that I was in when I was very young. And I had specific interactions with these Germans. That's how I knew them back then. And when I got older, I began to understand that they were Nazis and that there had been a terrible war and that they had been involved in genocide and that their lives were at risk, because many of them were convicted of these crimes, but their knowledge base was so extraordinary that the United States government brought them over here. So I'm working a bit more on that book, but thank you for all the credits that you gave me on the books that I have written, MK Ultra Dark Labs, and that one's a miracle that I was able to publish it, and the Hybrid Project, which was one of my early ones, but it really discusses how far these people went in the absence of any supervision, any higher power, or any moral authority self-generated. These people have done an incredible amount of experimentation that has not been acknowledged. So we're going to be working on that today to acknowledge some of it. My adopted family, I have to give credit to the woman that eventually adopted me, Buzzy, for saving these photographs I'm going to be sharing. And before she died of cancer, she gave me a book of all of these photographs. And I needed to wait until technology was high enough to even be able to like analyze them and like zoom in on them, because many of them you'll see are like Polaroids and really old. So it took a while to get all this information together in a usable format. And I just want to say, Emma, that in the old days, if you brought photographs of things that were dated by the camera manufacturer, people might consider that evidence. And these things have been ignored. This sort of evidence that people have collected, it just is mind-boggling that the elite are able to skirt on so many of these types of issues. And there's a reason for that. There's benefit to the users and receivers of the technology. So this is a big spiritual issue, I think. But anyway, I wanted to open this with a little bit of background on MK Ultra and talk about how it was a covert CIA program launched in 1953 to study mind control, interrogation techniques, and behavioral modification. They used drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological experiments. And they always say on people who have not given informed consent. And in many cases, as you'll see from the photographs, they were using newborn babies. There's no way I could have ever given them informed consent. Driven by Cold War fears, the program became infamous for unethical human experimentation, and it was supposedly exposed in the 1970s. Now, I say that because I was expecting to testify in the MK Ultra hearings, and there was another sequence of events that happened to me physically that made it impossible for me to do so. But it did lead to more public investigation, and the public also condemned what they were able to find out. And they reported 149 subprograms, but many of these were never fully investigated. And that speaks to the benefit from these technologies that I had mentioned earlier. All of us have personally benefited from experimentation that came out of the MK Ultra program, and we'll go more into that as we go through the presentation. Officials claim that the files were destroyed, reportedly by counterintelligence chief Jesus James Angleton. But I maintain the data was way too valuable to have been entirely burned. And Richard Helms was the director of the CIA under Nixon, and he was also involved in the destruction of these records. And I did not have face to face contact with him, but my adopted grandfather did. So I knew that they were going to be destroying records and that justice was going to not be coming. I have a family background, so whenever you're ready to roll the PowerPoint, then I am too. So, my family background, and if you click the second slide, it should go to a map of, yeah. My birth parents, my testimony is based on my recollections. I cannot confirm my paternity. So, unless they release my personal records, which I'm pretty sure they have a set in Washington, they also have a set at the Vatican, I will not be able to prove who my birth parents were. And in respect for folks that don't know anything about this that might be related to my birth parents, I don't want to disclose their full names nor the country that they were from. I have done DNA study, genetics, and I'm 25% English, 25% French, 10% Polish, 10% Scottish, 10% Swiss, 10% Austrian German, and 10% Irish. And these are estimates so that we can understand this. I looked for more information to support my suspicions. So I have been looking for as much evidence as I can gather about who my birth parents were. And I do have a bracelet that my birth mother gave me. And that is it. Like, that is all I have. But she used to bring me a little bouquet of lily of the valley flowers when I was in the hospital in a state of blindness. So some of the experiments when I was really young caused me to go blind because of swelling, brain swelling. And I could smell her, I couldn't see her. She came from Eastern Europe after World War II, and she began translating Operation Paperclip papers from the German scientists. And the Allied forces were in many countries, so anything they could get, they took. And so she was translating these papers. That's how she made a living after she was able to escape her country, her Eastern European country, escape the war and bring her, she had a lot of children, bring those children to America. She made her living translating papers, and she lived in Ohio, pretty close to Wright-Patterson Air Base. And her work was connected to the Operation Paperclip, the U.S. program that brought German scientists and technical knowledge into the American military and the aerospace programs. And they also did a lot with pharmaceuticals. I believe that I was born at Wright-Patterson Air Base around 1956, although my birth certificate lists a later date. My mother would have been around 45 or 46 if I have the right mother correct, which I'm not sure I do. But she was unable to raise me because of trauma and she was displaced from her country and the loss of her personal property after the war. So people that came over were really struggling, and they were targeted for that type of, anger at people. The Kennedy administration allowed my mother and her children to come to the United States, and she gave them citizenship so they could stay here. And she visited me when I was in these experiments whenever she could. My father was a German aerospace engineer who already had a family. Since neither parent could care for me, I believe I was placed in experimental research related to long distance space travel and the effects of reduced gravity on infants and young children. I began modification surgery shortly after birth, and the earliest scans identified in photographs appear to date from when I was maybe 3 to 4 months old. So, and I'll show that picture later on in the program here. After those modifications, I was assigned to what I would describe as a secret space blimp program involving large live aboard blimps that were in low Earth orbit. And I believe that researchers observed children and how they developed in reduced gravity to prepare for long distance space travel. The Space Blimp Program. After modifications, surgical modifications, I was assigned to what I would describe as a secret space blimp program involving large live aboard blimps that were in low Earth orbit. I believe that researchers observed how children developed in reduced gravity to prepare for future long distance space travel. My extended time away from Earth appeared to delay my growth and physical development, and one of the men collecting data for the Space Blimp program was named Sidney Gottlieb. I remember being brought to hospital facilities near Wright Patterson for bone growth, blood draws, growth charts, and weight measurements. Sidney Gottlieb worked with Nazis to design experiments on American children based on findings they got from the Nazis and the camps and the experiments that they did. That is how I met the famous medical surgical team of former Nazis. So I knew Dr. Schreiber, Dr. Ruff, Dr. Benninger, and Dr. Struckold. They were part of the Space Blimp program, so they did aeronautical sciences. I was surgically operated on, I believe, to replicate designs for transhuman beings with an American interpretation to benefit Wall Street and also powerful political pedophiles in Washington. I had always thought that I would be sent to a space based assignment when I grew up, since that was the original plan. Well, it didn't go as planned. I made a transition after President Kennedy's assassination. So that changed the plans of our government and its research programs. After President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, I believe the Space Blimp program was shut down amid panic over these hidden programs in Washington. The surviving children, like me, needed new placements, and under President Johnson, I was moved into medical research. Officially, I was considered about 2 years old. I believe that I was biologically closer to 7 years old. I had been modified by the former SS medical teams for space travel, and I knew all of them from the surgery and the medical data that they were collecting. And it is my belief that the sub program was to study hibernation for long distance travel. They wanted to document slowing growth rates. In 1963, I believe that John McCone, the director of Central Intelligence, assigned my new birth date and name. I was chemically mind erased at that time. I couldn't remember my original name and reprogrammed to accept my new identity and my new name. So they used a variety of methods on that. We can discuss that at a different time, but they're known for doing hypnosis and chemical mind eraser. I was taken to sponsor homes, and they were trying to develop a new identity for me. But because of my delayed development, I looked like a toddler and I had difficulty crawling or walking until I adjusted to Earth's gravity. So being up and down in space had affected my ability to stand upright and walk. I was sent to sponsors' homes for weeks and months at a time so that I could be cared for in a so called normal environment. So I would be walking and trying to crawl against gravity. Through the program, I was introduced to Al and Rita. They eventually became my adopted grandparents. Al was a high ranking Mason, and Rita was connected to the Spanish royal bloodline and the Eastern Star Group. Rita and I had a lot in common. She had a daughter named Buzzy, that was her nickname, who was in Florida with her husband named Don. And they were very connected into these space and research programs. Eventually, they would adopt me in the future years. Technology networks and the World's Fair. The technology networks and the World's Fair, people don't really understand that this was a big place to make connections. So after World War II, the military gathered and organized large amounts of technology for development. I believe groups such as the Masons helped distribute this information. So they would give preferred data out to their high ranking members. And the members would return to their corporations that they worked for from these Washington meetings with blueprints for products such as microwave ovens, barcode readers. 9/11, the emergency system was set up, and other technologies. High ranking Masons were invited to events like the New York World's Fair to be included in discussions to disseminate valuable information like these patents, blueprints, and connections with the Wall Street capital. So they were going to need funding to be able to build this. They planned the use of children in medical experiments, psychological experiments, sexual experiments, and adrenochrome harvesting. No one that I knew of had a moral compass at these planning meetings. They were very greedy. In January of 1964, I began what I called my new life as a medical test subject. I was taken to New York during the World's Fair, where I believe decisions were made about my placement in long-term medical research programs. The New York Fair brought together corporations, wealthy sponsors, and influential figures from around the world, including Walt Disney and Roy Disney. And I believe that my father helped design the Space Pavilion and that the fair influenced my later assignment to medical research programs and to amusement parks. So I had a terrible time at the World's Fair, let me tell you. um, I was sent to Orlando, but I met different famous people at the New York's World's Fair, and one of them was Robert Maxwell, who assessed me for my new placement, and that's how I got sent to Orlando for use at the amusement park. In Orlando, I was housed at Sunland, which was a mental facility for children. And they also had surgical care there and did experimentation on children with developmental delays and difficulties and children that had birth defects and genetic abnormalities. So this was a place that they drew victims from. They also housed me at a Sunland facility in Tallahassee when they had political events, when these powerful men would come to town and visit lawmakers. They would sometimes host parties, and I'm sure everybody understands these kinds of parties. On one occasion, after I bit one of the politicians, he removed me from his limousine, forced a shoe into my mouth, twisted it, and broke my jaw in 3 places. He later became the Vice President of the United States. Children at Sunland were transported to the amusement park and taken to underground labs for experimentation. I believe that they were used to help design robots for the attractions at the amusement park, and they were also subjected to severe physical harm, and some of them they were unalived. Some children were collected from church run homes for children whose parents had been struggling with alcohol, drugs, or crime. And I believe doctors and nurses justified their abuse and harvesting adrenochrome, harvesting organs, by claiming that they were helping society by eliminating undesirable offspring. So this was uh, a program to reduce uh, the children from these people. Euthanasia and eugenics, that's the word I'm looking for, eugenics. It was a eugenics program, and they were doing society a favor. During one life altering morning, I left Sunland and I went to the amusement park and was taken to their underground hospital facilities. The engineers were working on robotic hand movements, and they needed a certain sized hand to electrify for movements. And that's when I saw what I call, and we have another slide. Yes, robotic arms and transhuman programs of the 60s and 70s. But when I passed through those doors, that's what I saw, baby bye bye hand. It was a child's hand on a metal form that was moving due to electricity, and I was horrified at the sight. When I passed through the doors of the surgical suite, I was strapped down on a metal surgical table. A nurse walked up and began marking my arms after making careful measurements. I was covered in a surgical black marker, like all these marks to take things from me. And I was beginning to realize that my death was going to be imminent. However, at that moment, the phone rang in the suite, and I believe it was President Johnson, and he said not to dissect me alive or harvest my adrenaline. My father was close friends with Johnson and I believe that is how I came to be released. My father sent a car for me a little while later, and I was driven 45 minutes away to NASA, and I stayed in a yellow trailer at the Old Gate B location. I spent the next 6 months there. I was getting used to and being prepared to go and live with Don and Buzzy. But I met many aerospace scientists and engineers, and I already knew most of them from my time in Huntsville, Alabama, going up and down in the space blimp because that was one of their bases. I did not know that Nazis had perpetrated the genocide of Jews in Europe. I did not learn that fact until much later. You see, in those days, in the early 60s and mid 60s, the Nazi engineers were supposedly already dead. They had already been hung at Nuremberg. So this was a very guarded secret that they were here engineering things in America. And in 1963, in fact, some of the Nuremberg trials were still going on. So we did not talk about it. I did not know. I just knew there had been a terrible war and people had suffered greatly from it, like my mother. But the Nazis, their identities were kept a secret. And I just understood that they were very, very smart and important people. So that's the bulk of what I have today. And we can talk about things that we might want to discuss next time, like the use of implants to receive radio waves and communicate with other worldly beings. Now, I made a slide of another worldly being, and I wanted to go back, if you don't mind, Emma, and talk about and show the pictures of the brain implants, some of the surgeries that I had. So I tell people that I started the brain sculpting very, very early. You can see, if my suspicions are right, that I was 3 to 4 months old. That's probably around 6 months developmentally. I may have been much older because of the hibernation program. But these are places where I have scars, and I kind of back engineered myself looking at my face closely, and I have really terrible scars behind my ears from the implant, the halo implant, which I shared a picture of. But they were designing me and implanting me. And to this day, I don't know if they tried to implant me with alien material or alien chips that they harvested from crashes and victims of crashes. I don't know. So I'm just going to have to live with that.
You're so precious.
Well, thank you. But
yeah.
yeah, that adoption was going to be arranged through the Catholic Church. So my mother was not affiliated with the Catholic Church at all. In fact, she was in an opposing religion. So I don't think that this was a good match. She donated me, or I was abducted, or however the story really goes. But in this picture, I have a blue aluminum halo implant that was holding my head together after brain sculpting. And you can see the amount of surgical interventions I had just with that huge scar. But there were other things that were implanted into my skull as well. But that one was a blue tracking halo that they locate from space. And I don't know all the details about that, but that's what I understand. And there's another point of view on it, a side view, when after I had them removed and my hair was growing a little bit, you could see that I had, like, I call them hoops and halos implanted that I had to wear. And they were collecting brainwave data. So sometimes when I received ECT, which is electroshock therapy, they were tracking the pathway of the electricity through my body. And they were gathering the data using some of these metallic implants where they could pin clips to them and have output measurements of the electricity. So they would surmise what was causing resistance to those electrical flows. But all kinds of different energy forms like electricity, microwave energy, all kinds of things like that, scalar. And they were tracking and measuring the impact on a human body and brain, obviously. Okay, so I had a hole in my back of my head in the prior picture. And this particular person, she actually had somebody capture a photograph of the actual equipment installed into her brain. So this person is from Canada. And I always think that Americans think, oh, we're safe. That was in Canada. But my photos are similar, and those were all on American soil. And I came out of American hospitals and American facilities. So this was very much ongoing in America. We are not safe. And my pen name is Starfire. And so I wrote Starfire and my adopted sister. This is how we looked when we came back from the amusement park labs. We had been used for robotic arms and brainwave mapping, animation, movement sequences. She's got, my poor little infant sister has 2 holes in her shoulders from where they were measuring movements and arm movements and all kinds of things. And she's got a bruise where I believe she was implanted in the back of her neck. And that would have been to like dumb her down, like control her brainstem, the rate of her impulses through her brainstem. And that is just my hypothesis. I don't have any proof of this. And I am laying there with a scarred up head, trying to wake back up. So this is how they left us after we left the amusement park experiments. And I think my adopted mother was mad, so she took these Polaroid pictures because they were hidden for many years. But these private corporations, they had a private nuclear reactor on site at this amusement park facility. They also did satellite link testing. So these private corporations would also test things. And this is a picture of two drugged children. We hear about it a lot, but this is an actual picture.
These photos, if somebody didn't have context for it and looked, they might think, oh, look, two kids just sleeping on the floor, you know? And there's so many survivors that have photographs that look sort of benign just at first glance, but whenever you really dive into the story behind it, it's so dark. And then whenever you zoom in, you can see things like bruising and scars and different things that corroborate the story behind it. And it's devastating whenever you get that backstory. And what a miracle you have so many photos of you and your sibling as a child to where you can look and zoom in and actually have detail that you can see.
Right. Right. It's a miracle. That's for sure. So I don't know what other slides. This one, oh yeah, my hair caught fire during satellite links. So when they were testing to see if they could make a GPS mark point with my location, my hair caught fire and I ran into the water to put it out.
Oh my gosh. Did you get any scars from that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is one of the examples. You can see I have a lot of scars up at my hairline, but
Yeah.
I also had uh, skin grafts in certain places in my face. I was very young, so I'm lucky that most of the injuries you can't really tell when you look at me unless you
Right.
look really close and I use makeup. But yeah, I have skin grafts and I got those when I was very young because they collapsed the bones here, and that story's in dogs where these just pop loose. And I had a lot of trouble having my ventricles sealed. So the damage was severe and punctured my ventricles, which in those days it was a death sentence. So one of the wealthy families had rubber trees down in South America, and they flew down and got pure rubber from one of their rubber trees for medical purposes. Came back and they used the rubber. I had brain surgery to seal the leak of my cerebral spinal fluid out of my ventricle. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. And you're so sweet. Look at you still smiling, even though you go through such torture every day. In one of your books in MK Ultra Dark Labs, you mentioned something that just broke my heart. And I don't remember the exact words, but you were so abused. It was so normalized for you that you didn't really think that you had this really bad life. You know, it was just every day for you. Like it was just protocol. It's just what you do as a living human being is go through all of this. And you were talking about some of the people that you didn't like seeing, but also some people that were like that weren't that bad to be around. Even though they're all like involved in your abuse, you still like try to make sense of it by having this kind of, it just became your life, you know? And that really broke my heart to read that this wasn't even something to you that was wrong. It just was what you do as a child.
Yeah, I know differently now, obviously, but
Right.
back then I had no basis for anything but this. So I just kind of hung with it, but it's been obviously a lot to overcome. So, yeah.
I can't even fathom. And I didn't know if you wanted to go over some of these things, but I know you have a couple more slides in here.
Well, I wanted to show all those brain surgeries. That's not a joke. There are implants, and they were meant to link to satellites. So these are my photos. Werner von Braun and Arthur Rudolph gave me a Brownie camera and some Polaroid flash cubes as a gift. And so I was allowed to take these photographs that I'm sharing today. I was in the VAB building, and I had to climb up on the scaffolding. And sometimes I would be told to stand in a certain place so that they could get a wireless link with my transmitter and transponder in that were implanted in my brain as um, small devices. So this one is an American one. My next slide is a CCP one. So this was in probably 1969, maybe 1968. And the CCP, what are they doing linking to American citizens for mind control? Who's in charge of that? You would think the military's in charge of that. This satellite being launched out of Cape Canaveral, this surely cannot have been a secret. It was launched. So, but I stood next to that CCP satellite, and they have a panel. And they opened it and they held it until it started blinking, and I could hear a tone, and they knew I was linked. They shut the panel and launched the satellite. Well, a month later, here I am having severe symptoms that look like autism. So, this to me has always been a big question about these kinds of programs. So, I think that was the last satellite one I had. And I talked about um, aerospace and its connection um, to the New York World's Fair. But I also, when I was very young, and after I was a baby, you could see some of the implant and scarring around my head that they put in a chip where I could get a radio frequency signal, and I would get communications with this guy that I drew, and he would give GPS points and a little bit of other information, but mostly GPS points. And I would write them on a blackboard with a piece of chalk. So, but I was, maybe 4 years old biologically, but I would have been 9 years old mentally. So that's how I was able to do it. And that's because of the hibernation and stasis program.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these notes that you took. And so this was at the time that you were going through these programs where this photo of this alien that you were in contact with, Eisenhower was the president at the time.
Well, he was president up to 1961, and
Okay.
I have not confirmed my birth date. So could have had me in 1956 when she was 46, I think, which was a late life baby, but not impossible. And I would assume that if it was the other one, was my birth mother, she would have been somewhere in 1956 to 1958. So he would have been president when I was born. He would have possibly initiated my use in the space program. And he, I believe, had an agreement with the Greys to work with them to develop space-based things. So Earth is very productive, and you can give somebody a design and they'll engineer it for you and produce it. And I believe that's what was going on, but there was a trade-off. And so I would get coordinates of different places where these ships were going to go or had recently been. And so they were tracking them for some purpose. So, like I said, I was very young doing this, so I looked like a savant, and that's what I was diagnosed as, with autism, as a savant, because I was older mentally, having been through the program and what I went through when I was gifted to the space program. But I was able to communicate these coordinates and write these notes on these blackboards. So that's what I did. And my growth rate was very slow, and I got measured by Sidney Gottlieb till I want to say I was maybe about 9 years old. 8 or 9 years old. I remember driving to Kentucky and going to his house, and he did measurements. And who knows who he turned them into, but they were coming up upon the MK Ultra hearings, and they were making decisions, taking last data measurements before they attempted to kill me one more time. So, and I had mentioned to you that I was shot with a small caliber bullet in the backyard of one of the homes I lived at. And I ended up going to a facility at NASA because I survived. And one of the reasons I survived is because I had metal in my head. The bullet had to pass through. But an act of God, or I don't know what it was, told me to take a step to the right. And when I did that, the shooter, his bullet passed through the edge of the house, slowed down enough that when it hit the metal in my forehead, that the impact wasn't catastrophic, and it exited the back of my head. So, of course, I fell over. It was a terrible memory. It's a terrible memory I really don't like to remember because it was extraordinarily painful. And I have a memory of sitting up and trying to pull the bullet out of my forehead, which is disgusting. So, next thing I know, I'm in a hospital at NASA in an underground secret facility, and the guys that operated on me spoke with an English accent. And I'm thinking, oh, they came from MI6 or MI5 from over in the monarchy over in Europe, in England, from the Queen, because my family members were all bloodline connected. So that's what happened there. And, I was out of commission. I lost that year of school and had to repeat fourth grade again because that's when it happened, when I was in fourth grade. And people need to understand that they're not chasing 16, 17-year-olds exclusively. They're messing with children that are infants and toddlers, and it's terrible. And very much these groups are connected by pedophilia. A lot of pedophilia. That's the writing connection, is they're all into pedophilia in some form.
How many other children do you remember being in these projects with you, or were you a sole child for these specific programs and you were alone most of the time?
Well, I was really close with a young man whose grandfather and great grandfather were airplane manufacturers for the Nazis. I can say a famous German aerospace manufacturer who made airplanes in the early 1900s, 1930s, 1940s. They were very excellent aerospace and airplane engineers, and they were very well known. And they had. I worked with the grandson, and we both worked with Dr. Debus on plasma experiments. And we grew up working, like we would go to the VAB building, Dr. Debus would be there, and he would show us things using plasma, energy, and resonance fields. And this work was very, very dangerous. When he told us, don't touch that, you didn't touch it because it might blow up or you might get electrocuted. These were very, very dangerous experiments, and they were high electricity experiments. So they actually, I think, had a replication of the Nazi bell. So, but these are things I was really going to talk more deeply about when I release my upcoming book. And I have to also research it because I have to remember that I was a kid and I understood some things, but not other things. But I will say on that note that my father used to make glasses that could see interdimensionally. And so we can talk about that. I wrote about that in my next book, and I'll be releasing that hopefully within the next year. But he had special glasses, and I could see things beyond our visual range. And I think some of that eventually became the infrared goggles that people use and the night scopes that people use. So that's what happened with that technology in the future. So,
Wow. The one thing that I really appreciate about all the work that you've done to document your testimony and your openness with talking about it is helping us understand the connections between different disclosures, because in the mainstream world they're all separate, they're all compartmentalized. You have the alien abductees, then you have people who can see craft in the sky and who have these psionic abilities where they can communicate with craft, and they see orbs. And then you have the human trafficking community, you have MK Ultra community, and they all sort of have their own reputation. And then year after year, we're running in this never-ending hamster wheel with each individual thing segregated because we can't come to a conclusion of the who, when, where, what, why. What is all of this? And it's only when you put it all together, like you have, that you can really see a clear picture of how all of these things are intertwined. They're not separate. These things all go together, and all these disclosure movements are all interrelated. They should not be compartmentalized. And I think it's just such an important conversation to see the interconnectedness. And then one of the most important things as well that you talk about is your emphasis on they weren't using just adults, whether consenting or not. They weren't using 17, 18-year-olds. They were using infants, newborns, children. That was the blueprint that they found was most effective with creating a mind control slave. You start somebody later on in life, it doesn't work as well as it does somebody without a personality that's developed yet, without their full brain yet, without any knowledge of the world. Children have a blank slate, and that was something that was very intriguing to them, along with the dissociation of children being able to do that way more easily than an adult. And I really just appreciate your authenticness with how you share, because it's very confusing in the world. There's a lot of disinformation, misinformation. There's a lot of cover-ups with this, a lot of compartmentalization. And I feel you've done a really great job of emphasizing the importance of this in a very grounded way, and being able to shine a light that these are crimes that are being committed. This isn't some glorification of like, oh, look, a craft, it's so cool, and an alien, like there's torture behind this stuff. There's pain. The development of this technology was humans being experimented on, children like you. All the things that we look at and glorify in the world that are cool and, trendy, there's oftentimes a horror story behind it. And I feel your testimony helps shine a light on that aspect of it. So thank you for all the work that you've done. I can't imagine how traumatizing it is to kind of relive all this stuff and figure it out, and then to pour it on paper, and then to come speak about it on podcasts like this. And I just think you're absolutely brilliant, and your work is so important and amazing. And I'm really grateful that you're continuing it by writing more books for us.
well, thank you. And I always am thankful for people that listen to these stories because we've never been really listened to. And I appreciate you and your amazing talents, Miss Emma. Oh my gosh. And all the things that you give up every day to do this for people. So this is not about entertainment. This is about education. And once you get educated, you want to think about how to use it wisely. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Now, that's what I was thinking.
And Anna has been very gracious with saying she'll come on again. There's so much to her testimony. It's impossible to fit it all into one episode. So we decided to break it up into parts. And this was extremely valuable. I feel this is an episode too you can go through and listen to multiple times. But Anna, for people listening, your books are for sale, which is exciting. And I want to direct people on where they can get them, because your books go into far more than you could really ever express on a podcast or even multiple podcasts. So let's connect people with you and share where they can learn more about you.
Yes, I do have my books for sale on Amazon. They're called, one of them is called MK Ultra Dark Labs. Another one is called The Hybrid Project. And then I have a book with the photographs similar to what I've shared in Starfire Disclosure. So you have to look because they're not going to come up very easily. Dark Labs is the one that comes up the quickest, but the other ones, and my writer's name is Anna Starfire or A Starfire. So, and we can talk about why I chose Starfire. It is, again, you're hearing distortion after distortion about how these terms are used. But we will save that, and I will explain why I chose to use Starfire, where it came from, and what it means in the future.
And do you want to share just real quick just the difference between the different books? Maybe just give a little teaser of what all of them are about.
Yeah, the Hybrid Project is one of my first books, and so it's kind of got all kinds of little tidbits in it. So I talk about the use of vaccines like mRNA testing, and I published that in 2013, way before everyone understood what I was talking about. And I also, in that book, talk about the potential use of body parts collected from crushed materials and implanted into people for hybridization and chimera projects. And so no one has ever spoken about that as far as I know. So I do talk all about that. I talk about how there's just so much malicious intent. They would take algae blooms from off the coast, off the Gulf Coast of Mexico, refine it and try to create saxotoxins out of it to, and send it out through the spy agencies and inject each other with it. And it's just awful, some of the stuff that they did. So that's described in Hybrid Project. My other book is Starfire Disclosure, where I give some of my history. And people have to understand that I've been writing these books since 2013, but it's another 13 years of remembering, working on this, doing research to confirm what I'm remembering. So the Starfire Disclosure, though, does have the photographs, and I do talk about some other types of brain-based experiments, like the crystal implants, and also they were pushing geodes in that they would harvest from butterflies and different creatures like that. It's really quite something, including birds and falcons. So all of that is in there. And then the MK Ultra project, the Dark Labs, is really the opening chapter discusses how I received a shot, and I called it red mercury. I don't know what was in it. I'm sure there was mercury in it, but it also looked red. So that's what I called it when I was little. I was scared of it. And Dr. Ruff gave it to me, and I ended up dying. So I talk in there about how I disassociated out of my body and ended up on Jupiter. So that's a really cool story. But I came back and had symptoms of autism. And I talk about crashing in one of the spaceships. I talk about traveling with Dr. Kennemeyer because I was really little, so I used to fly in some of his missions. And also with Dr. Emil Salman, how I used to fly with some of his missions. And Eric Trobe, he was a Nazi who did animal experiments using bioweapons. He called it herd strike, where he would kill the whole herd with these bioweapons. So yeah, that's in Dark Labs. And so it really is a good name for that book, the way I described all the experiments that I was in. But there are very much political connections to this, and people from history who you never knew were involved in these sorts of things. And maybe you thought they were nice guys, but they certainly were not. So that's a good summary, and hopefully it'll help people make good decisions. But some of the books have a lot of reviews, so please take your time and read that and go from there.
And one of the special things that you did was also put these on Audible. So for people who are maybe on the go and want to listen, she has AI read through her books for you. So if you guys are readers in the car or while you're working or doing chores and you guys are listening in your headphones, please go to Audible. You guys can also access that too from Amazon. She's right. These books They are difficult to find. If you type her name in, you can tell her books are very shadow banned on here. They don't want you to find them easily. So what I'm going to do is put each individual book down below in the show notes and their links. So you guys can click on all three. And you guys can also access the Audible from there. But I'll have all three books linked separately. That way you guys can find them easily and don't have to go on a rabbit hunt looking all over Amazon for her books that they're clearly trying to make a little bit less visible for us to find. So I love that you turned your testimony into so far a trilogy, and that we're going to have another one. But I really love how you've broken down the topics. I think it makes it very palatable, and it creates something of focus for each book, which is very fascinating how you did it. It's not necessarily chronological. It's sort of based on these different pieces of your life, and it breaks it down very, very well. So I would really encourage you guys to support. So many of you guys ask how you guys can support survivors, how you can help. This is an amazing way. If you guys can't purchase the book, listen on Audible. If you can't do that, share it with people. Go post it on your social media. And please leave some reviews. That's just so helpful. If you guys could leave reviews either way, give her 5 stars and just help elevate it. Sometimes those things too can help push through the algorithm. So if you guys can help in any way, buy it for a friend. If they have a birthday coming up, share it on your social media. Help any way that you can get the word out so we can help support survivors and help them continue to disclose and create avenues for them to continue working and buying equipment to podcast and speak out and to be able to support themselves. It's amazing. Anna's here doing these podcasts for free for us and offers her books at such an affordable price for the work that she's put in. So if you guys could support, I'd really appreciate it. And like I said, I'll have all of that info below for you guys. And Anna, was there anything that you wanted to close with, or anything that you wanted to say to any survivors listening or to listeners?
Well, keep going, never give up, and understand that where you are at today, at this moment, you will not be there a year from now. Next week, you will not be in the same place. So don't ever give up, and always do something nice for yourself every single day. It doesn't have to be big or expensive, but be kind to yourself in some little way every single day. So that's it.
She said it better than I could, and I couldn't agree more with you, Anna. And so for everybody listening, again, head down to the show notes. We could not do this without you guys listening on the other side. You guys are the change that we wish to see in the world, and you guys are the ones that are going to help propel the change that we need so desperately in the world. Otherwise, without you guys, we'd be speaking into a black hole, and it's you guys that help bring awareness to this on a bigger scale, and we couldn't thank you enough. So if you guys found value in this episode, share it with a friend, post it on your social media, take clips and share it. A little bit goes a long way with helping get the word out, especially knowing how censored and shadow banned these topics get. So with that being said, you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.